The film begins with a flashback of 3 men running in the dark. 2 of them are Texas Rangers, while the other one is a criminal. Finally, one of the Rangers, Steve Lucas, captures the criminal, but the criminal overpowers him and holds the Ranger by the throat. He threatens to shoot the Ranger if his partner, Jim Dillon, shoots him. Steve Lucas instructs him to shoot, but he hesitates. As the criminal tries to escape, Jim shoots at him and the criminal. While at the bar, Jim Dillon receives a letter from the Texas Rangers indicating the death of Steve, but continues to assure him that no charges will be brought against him. Now, the movie continues in a productive Greenland with plantations and animals, with a quiet neighborhood. In a police station, one Jim Dillon comes into the state marshal's office and is being briefed by Matt, his assistant, about the mayor's resolution on parking fines. He, however, realizes that Jim is not okay. Matt questions him about his whereabouts. He then goes to get coffee that his mate, Matt, had prepared. Matt adds what Katie had briefed him about Jim at the bar and the bad news he had received about Steve Lucas. Jim continues to explain who Steve Lucas was and what had happened. He finishes by warning Matt about keeping tabs on him again. On the roads of Horse Cave, there are 2 motorcyclists incoming. They pass through the station, and Matt questions Jim about them. At the cafe, Katie is serving her customers, and they are discussing missing sermons. Another pair, an aspiring mayor and his campaign manager, are talking about elections and how Jim Dillon would be a threat. As the motorcyclists are moving, everyone in town is suspicious and they stare. Meanwhile, Jim leaves the office as the 2 motorcyclists make their way to the cafe. One of the cyclists rudely sips a customer's coffee at the cafe, while the other one moves to the counter to order beer. Katie makes it clear that they do not serve beer until 5 p.m. He angrily pulls her, which raises an alarm, and people from the cafe run out. The aspiring mayor is trying to make a call. Katie gets into a heated fight with the cyclist after she hits him with a glass for making demands and disrespecting her. Jim comes into the cafe, asks what's going on, and takes over from Katie to fight the cyclists. He arrests one and orders the other cyclist to leave the cafe. At the bank, Matt is having a chat with Amanda, asking her to go for dinner with him. She doesn't give him her word, but assures him that she'd think about it, as seen on the CCTV cameras. At the state marshal's office, the motorcyclist claims that he was defending himself. The other cyclist rides by the station as Jim observes. Matt comes in and finds the cyclist and Jim, who orders him to take the cyclist to county lockup by himself. Jim insists on being left behind as he suspects something about the cyclists. They take him to the police car, and Matt is expected to have returned in 30 minutes. However, the other cyclist is watching from afar. Immediately, a counselor comes to talk to Jim, threatening to make him an agenda item during the next Board of Supervisors meeting because he saw him at the bar the previous night and due to the incident at the cafe. There is a gang of cyclists led by Diblo riding on the roads. On his way to county lockup, Matt receives a call confirming that he'd be there in 30 minutes. He comes back to the cafe and checks in with Katie to see whether she is okay. One of the gang members cuts the power, disconnecting communication in the town. Jim leaves Katie to go and confirm what is going on. On the way, Matt finds the cyclist lying down and stops to check on him. The cyclist pulls out his gun and orders Matt to get in the car, bangs the door, and drives off. At another road intersection, another gang van is looking for a sheriff on the road using a tracker. The lady speeds up so the sheriff will follow them for speeding. They slow down, and the sheriff gets out to check her license and registration. He is, however, shot dead in the back by one of the gang members, Dirty Bob. The comps guy, ex-Marine, reminds them that no one was supposed to die, and he is threatened with being next. The 2 men take off the sheriff's uniform and comms. Dirty Bob puts it on and gets into the sheriff's car. Jim gets into the station, realizes that the phone is not working, and he goes out to check what is going on. On the streets, the cyclist gang is incoming, and Marshal Jim is attacked by a gang member who points a gun at him. He mentions that it's his pleasure to see him while handing over the radio. As the gang stops, Marshal Jim discovers another van at the bank where 2 gang members go in to rob it. Everybody in the bank is ordered to get out with their hands on the outside wall, except for Amanda. Diablo, the gang leader, introduces himself to Marshal Jim. He talks about Steve Lucas. Diablo takes off Jim's badge and puts it on himself. He cocks his gun after Jim refuses to comply with his commands. Diablo orders his men to open the vault as Amanda runs to hug her boyfriend, briefing him about the time lock on the vault. One of the gang members orders the manager to open the vault for him. At midday, the vault opens. On the roadside near large plantations, Dirty Bob, in the sheriff's car, lights up some lighters and gets back into the car. Matt is brought back and is sat next to Marshal Jim. The bank staff are escorted across the street. Matt apologizes to Marshal Jim, but Jim tells him not to feel sorry for himself. Trixie approaches the counselor and Katie. Jim is heartbroken to see Katie in that situation. Diablo orders that they be taken to the church, and Katie warns them about doing so. Diablo and Katie have a conversation. He mentions knowing her dad. Diablo says that he is here to collect his dues, but he promises not to leave the place, despite the marshal assuring him that there is nothing else to steal in that town. However, Diablo is waiting for the armored truck, which is due to arrive in 28 minutes. Katie is dragged to the church. At the casino, a local security guard is having a chat with Candy, asking her out on a date. She confirms her availability, but insists he take her home early. The security guard returns to load the money into the armored truck. His colleague asks about the amount as they load the money and jokes about how many tacos they could buy with it. The local security team does a routine comms check as they leave the casino. At the bank, the gang has gotten the money from the vault and taken it to the van. As they are guarding the van, someone inside a truck starts shooting. The gang returns fire. Jim and Matt manage to escape. Jim takes one of the gang members' guns and disposes of it in a garbage bin as they look for an entrance. Diablo commands a woman in a car to get out and threatens to blow her up if the shooter doesn't stop. The shooting continues, and Diablo gets agitated. He gives the shooter a countdown to put the weapon down. Marshal Jim and Matt are inside a store, watching what's going on from a window. By the count of 6, Martin comes out, begging Diablo to stop, saying that the woman is his wife. Jim and Matt know that Martin's surrender was suicide. Diablo shoots Martin and continues the countdown to get Marshal Jim to show himself. Matt sets off the fire alarm, while Marshal Jim sets up a weapon they can use. Diablo shoots Martin's wife. Diablo calls his gang back, warning them of a fire. This acts as a distraction, allowing Marshal Jim and Matt to leave for the station. As they open the building where the fire alarm is coming from, an explosive goes off, and one gang member is down. The other hostages are in the church, guarded by Amanda and other gang members. One is even taking communion. The counselor asks about Jim and insists on reviewing his contract after the incident, but Katie pleads with him to stop the plan and focus on the current situation. On the streets, Marshal Jim gets into a truck, retrieves walkie-talkies, and orders Matt to go ahead and flag down the armored truck. Jim remains in town. In an abandoned house, Matt looks at the road and sees a sheriff's car parked at the end of County Road. He informs Jim, who discourages him from making contact, as the gang may be listening in. The armored truck approaches, and the driver makes contact to alert the other side about his arrival. Matt moves closer to get a clearer view of the truck and the sheriff in the car. The driver senses something is off and informs his colleague at the back, who complains about being late for his date. The driver stops and asks the officer about the situation and whether it's safe to proceed. The gang, pretending to be deputies, assures him that everything is fine, and the driver proceeds. Matt, hiding in a grassy heap, informs Jim and says he is coming back. Diablo and his crew check their watches as they wait for the armored truck. Matt emerges from hiding and returns to the town center. He spots one of the gang members trying to break into a building. The truck driver becomes increasingly suspicious, but the gang, dressed in sheriff's uniforms, had already warned him about a supposed gas leak. He asks his colleague to get out and confirm if everything is okay, but he hesitates. One of the gang's shooters gets into position. As the local security team gets ready to move, Marshal Jim reaches his house and grabs his gun, but hesitates. He has a flashback of the night Steve Lucas was killed. He then picks up the gun and leaves. The local security truck arrives at the bank where the gang is waiting. The driver tries to make a distress call, but there's no response because his comms had been shot. Diablo demands that the driver open the door, but he refuses. Diablo shoots the security guard while continuing to demand that the door be opened. At the back, the gang is setting up explosives to open the track. They are all set and inform their boss. Matt is in pursuit of the shooter inside a building. He picks up a shovel, which he uses to hit the shooter. Diablo orders his guy to blow up the track door. The door explodes, and the gang celebrates after finding the cash inside. Diablo instructs Pyro to light the hostages in the church on fire just because they have seen their faces. One of the gang members doesn't like the idea and confronts Diablo. He reminds him of his killings during a war in Iraq. Diablo hits him, leaving him unconscious and bleeding on the ground. He, however, does not allow his mate to shoot him. At the church, another gang leader is organizing the petrol jerrycans, and Amanda is looking after the hostages. The counselor assures Katie that everything will be okay. However, Katie is worried about Matt and Jim. Jim starts a car on the street and drives toward where the gang is. He beeps and crashes the car, then leaves running. Diablo instructs his guy not to shoot and to follow him. Jim runs inside a building where he finds some jerrycans. He receives a call from Matt asking where he is and about the guy he had taken down. Jim instructs him to stay up there and see whether he can use that weapon. Matt gets into position as Jim moves on the street with the jerrycan. He instructs Matt to hold his position. Jim finds the truck where Martin was shooting from. The criminal outside the church has set up the explosive and leaves to go back inside. Diablo comes into the church and picks up Katie. The counselor tries to stop him, but he's stopped by Amanda. Jim instructs Matt not to shoot. Diablo threatens to kill Katie if Jim does not give himself up. Matt surrenders to rescue Katie. Jim gets a clear shot at one of the guys and shoots him. Diablo sends Pyro to check the car across the church whose engine is on. Pyro finds the truck full of glass jars. He moves to the driver's side to check if there is anyone. He opens the truck door, and the truck explodes. Diablo is agitated. He asks his guys to get Katie and Matt inside the church. Jim tries to get in contact with Matt, but Matt does not respond. Diablo orders another truck. On the street, Jim captures the ex-Marine and orders him not to make any noise. Diablo comes back with the truck to load the money. He is mourning Pyro and is seeking revenge on Marshall. He reminds his guys that they are not supposed to forgive. Marshal Jim gets the ex-Marine to the station and starts to interrogate him. He confesses how Diablo hated the town because of how his dad died after working in a mine. Jim tells the ex-Marine that he should be ashamed of himself for joining the gang. In the church, Katie recalls that her dad had a radio in his office at the church. Matt agrees to go get it. At the station, Jim tries to contact Matt, but there's still no response. He sees two men running toward the police car. He locks the station, picks up two guns, and gives one to the ex-Marine after reminding him of the oath he took. He reminds him that he's under arrest. Matt is in the church office, where he makes contact with another station and seeks reinforcement. At the police station, Diablo and his guy break into the station and are shot by Marshal Jim. There's a gunfight between the two sides. Diablo's man is shot. He gets inside and shoots at the ex-Marine. He goes after Marshall. The lady driver of the gang is getting impatient. At the church, Katie attacks Amanda, and they start fighting. Katie shoots at her. She rescues all the hostages from the church. The Columbus reinforcement is incoming as Diablo is carrying all the money by himself to the truck. Matt is watching him from a distance. Twitchy insists that they should leave, but Diablo still insists on getting all the cash in the van. The guy in the sheriff's car comes to the town and informs them about the police incoming. Jim is outside and gets a clear shot at the guy in the sheriff's uniform. Diablo calls out to Twitchy to help shoot back. Twitchy is out of bullets and reaches for her bullet refill when Jim shoots her. Diablo is getting ready to leave on his bike. Jim and Diablo exchange gunfire. Diablo gets to the van, where he is putting money on his bike vest. Katie runs to her stable, where she gets her gun and bullets. She straps her horse, and they leave. Diablo loads the money on his bike, but his bike won't start. He leaves on foot. Jim, on the other hand, is loading his gun when he sees Katie on a horse. Diablo can't seem to find a car to use for his escape. He finds a bike, which also won't start. Jim tells Katie that only one guy is remaining, which shouldn't be an issue. Jim is impressed by Katie for bringing him the gun and the bullets. He kisses her on the lips before leaving to go after Diablo. He gets on the horse and goes after Diablo, who is on a motorcycle. Matt and Katie are left behind watching. Jim misses the bike 3 times, but manages to hit it on the 4th attempt. Diablo falls and is running on foot when Jim catches up with him and shoots at him. Jim becomes the mayor, and peace is restored in the town. He goes to the cafe for breakfast, where he meets with Katie, and they plan to go horse riding. The movie ends as they're kissing in the cafe.